All right, we caught up with Mick Walker about Purdue with a new head coach of the Boilermakers. Let's get the another new head coach in the Big Ten West. Final year of the Big Ten West, and that's Luke Fickell up at Wisconsin. Michael Hogan covers Wisconsin for Badger247. A lot of newness up there in Badgerland, Michael, because beyond Deion Sanders, Luke Fickell, he certainly felt like the splashiest hire of the offseason outside of Prime. So how has he impacted that Wisconsin program so far?
Yeah, it's, I mean, pick whatever you want, I guess. Pretty much everything has changed. It's funny how drastically it changed. October, after Illinois came up here and embarrassed Wisconsin here at Camp Randall Stadium, Paul Chryst was fired the next day, and everybody kind of figured that Jim Leonhard would just be the guy. It certainly seemed like it was shaping up that way, but yeah, Chris McIntosh made a big swing, went for Luke Fickell, impressive resume at Cincinnati, leading them to the playoffs a couple of years ago. So, I think right off the bat, you just look at what they're trying to do on offense. Bringing in Phil Longo from North Carolina. Wisconsin's running the air raid. I don't think anybody could have ever imagined that, right? Like, say goodbye to the fullback and using all 40 seconds of the play clock. I think it's going to be interesting. Like we were talking before we started here, the whole season feels like it kind of depends on how well that works for them here in the first year. They did make quite a few transfer portal additions to kind of, get guys who fit the scheme a little better. They totally revamped their quarterback room. Graham Mertz transferred to Florida. I thought that was a good kind of mutual parting of ways. After 3 years of Mertz, it was time to for him to move on and for Wisconsin to find something else. They got Tanner Mordecai from SMU, very successful quarterback there. We'll see how that translates to the Big Ten. I know a lot of people are kind of curious about that. Yeah. And Braden Locke from Mississippi State, clear number 2 guy. In fact, I think he might have put himself in a really good position to be the starter next year. I was really impressed with him. And then Nick Evers, another redshirt freshman, comes from Oklahoma. He might be the most physically gifted QB in that room, but he just kind of have to put it all together on the mental side of things, learning the playbook and whatnot. But, that's obviously, I'm sure we'll get more into the offense. And then I think, this might not be that unique on a national perspective, but I think what Wisconsin has been doing in the weight room now under Brady Collins is a drastic change. In the past, it kind of sounded like the guys would go in there, they'd work hard and, get their work done. But, now we're seeing, more of the, competition aspect of it. Brady Collins is a really intense guy. He has these guys, playing games in the weight room, competing against each other. And Squat Fest was a big kind of thing on Twitter a couple of weeks ago. I saw a lot of people around the Big Ten talking about that. And, that was kind of a big extravaganza for them. And, I thought just that was really interesting to kind of watch this offseason, the changes they made there. And then, another thing too, like I said, about the weight room, might not be that unique on a national perspective, but the social media efforts and just the program kind of putting itself out there more, being more marketable, promoting its brand a little bit more than it did in the past. So I think those initiatives have been interesting. And Fickell, is a big supporter of both of those things. Obviously, it's his program after all. And so those things off the top of my head, the offense, the transfer additions, and just some other things, off the field, weight room and social media, and just kind of engaging the fan base and the recruits differently. It's just been a complete 360 for this program.
Yeah, I think the modernizing would be kind of a word there. Both, and I think we all start with the offense there. Like Phil Longo has had such great success as an offense coordinator, Ole Miss, North Carolina. And he's obviously going to shake up what we know about Wisconsin offense. So what have you seen so far from Longo and the quarterbacks there? Because obviously there's a lot of newness and there's excitement in that, but there's also an unknown because let's be honest, I know the quarterback has been a problem, but they run the ball well at Wisconsin. They've had that identity that's done them so well for decades. So just what have you made of the changes so far?
Yeah, with the quarterbacks, Mordecai, obviously the clear number 1 guy. He told us in April or whenever he met with the media this spring that, he was 90% sure that he was going to go to the NFL draft. He was going to declare for the draft. he'd thrown for more than 7,000 yards over 2 seasons, 70 some touchdown passes. So he was really leaning that way. And then he got some feedback from scouts and NFL evaluators that, he didn't like, and entered the transfer portal. And he decided to come here and reunite with Phil Longo, who recruited him at Ole Miss, 5 or 6 years ago. And Fickell obviously was pretty familiar with him as well, because, Cincinnati played SMU a couple times over the last couple seasons. So they kind of had a familiarity there that they liked, and they liked that they get to start with a 6-year senior quarterback who can lead them to instant success and has a proven track record. Obviously, there are some questions about how well he'll translate, to the Big Ten, and the spring game wasn't really a great performance for him. He threw 4 picks and kind of had the fan base panicking a little bit. And I think national media kind of overreacted to that a little bit too. And that's kind of led to some, opinions of Mordecai this offseason that aren't very high, but my expectation is that he'll be, I'm not going to go out, come out here and say that he's going to have the best season ever by a Wisconsin quarterback, but I'm expecting him to have a very, very solid season and really improve his draft stock from what it was last year. And then obviously they set themselves up for the future at quarterback too, with guys like Locke and Evers. Both of them are redshirt freshmen, and Locke was really impressive. Mentioned earlier that Evers kind of has some developing to do, but they still really think highly of him. And then, they added a lot of receivers too, and they returned their top 3 guys from last year: Chimere Dike, Skylar Bell, and Keontez Lewis. And the transfers: CJ Williams from USC, Bryson Green from Oklahoma State, and then 2 guys from Cincinnati, Will Pauling and Quincy Burrows. All 4 of those guys should have pretty significant roles in the offense. They kind of want to have a rotation of 6 receivers this year. And that just gives you an idea of how quickly this offense is going to move. They're going to have keep guys fresh and rotate a number of receivers in games. So that's going to be something to watch for. I think the guy who impressed me most was Will Pauling, guy in the slot. If you look at Longo's offenses, traditionally, the slot receiver is their most productive. Josh Downs at North Carolina, Daz Newsome a couple of years ago too. Those guys put up some big numbers, and I'm expecting Will Pauling to kind of have that role for them this year. Short routes, get him in space, and he could do some damage. And I also think too that it's been interesting. I think the arrival of the air raid offense here has kind of naturally created a misconception that Wisconsin is going to go away from running the football. I don't think that is going to happen. I still think they are at times going to have to rely on Braylon Allen and Chez Mellusi like they have in the past. It's just going to look a little differently. You look at Longo's offenses, at North Carolina specifically, and they did a really good job of running the football. They actually were they had like the highest yardage total per game over Longo's 4 years in the ACC. Obviously, the quarterback run is a big part of that number. But you look at 2020 and Longo had Michael Carter and Javonte Williams. Both of those guys went over 1,000 yards and got plenty of carries. And Braylon Allen mentioned this offseason multiple times that, he's really excited not to see 8 or 9 man boxes anymore, because in the past teams could just load up against Wisconsin and really sell out for the run because it was coming. They didn't have a passing attack that could really help open things up in the running game. And that's not going to be the case anymore. I saw a stat from Pro Football Focus. Allen, and this wasn't surprising at all, Allen had faced, loaded boxes, 8 or 9 guys, more than any other running back in the country over the last 2 years. So he's really excited about that. I'm expecting Chez Mellusi to be a big factor too if he can stay healthy. That's kind of been a challenge for him over the last couple of years. But they have a nice 1-2 combination in that running back room, and I still really expect those guys to be huge factors in the offense. Another thing is too that they're going to have opportunities to catch the ball. Wisconsin wasn't using those guys as pass catchers in the past. Allen, both of those guys go into the NFL draft probably after this year, have opportunities to really round out their skill sets.
Yeah, I'm glad you hit on that misnomer of Phil Longo's offense, because looking up for Darian Dupree's decision, I was like, a lot of people are like, why would he go there? They're just going to throw the ball around. He had three running backs drafted at North Carolina in a short amount of time. So they run the ball well. Those guys get involved in the pass game. And what does the NFL want? They want some running backs who also are involved in the passing game. My one question for you is Wisconsin's O-line got dominated by Illinois last year. And the metrics for O-line metrics, how much ever you put into them, were very average for them last year. Should they be closer to a typical Wisconsin offensive line this year?
Yeah, you're right. The offensive line for Wisconsin the last 2 years really has been average, maybe even below average at times, certainly below average against Illinois. Man, they just dominated those guys up front. And Illinois dominated a lot of teams up front last year. But, yeah, it's hard to say because they're basically running it back with the same group. You'd expect maybe some improvement just from the continuity aspect of it. It's going to be interesting. I still think they have some things to figure out there on the offensive line in the first week or two of training camp. They're set at left tackle. Jack Nelson, a good player. He performed pretty well last year. I see a lot of early, first, second round buzz for him, so far for 2024 draft. Tanner Bortolini, who's been very versatile for them. He can play center, guard, or tackle. They have him kind of set at left guard, put him there. The center position is going to be the one that's going to be what people are watching most in the training camp, because they lost Joe Tippmann, who was their best player, arguably for the last 2 seasons, one of the best centers last year, and in that 2023 draft class. Jake Renfro transferred from Cincinnati. He performed. I liked what I saw from him early in the spring, but then he got injured and missed the rest of camp. We'll see if he's back. I'm expecting him to be back for training camp, but they had a lot of issues at center. They had to slide Bortolini over. And the thing that was fascinating about it is that these guys couldn't handle shotgun snaps because they're not used to it. So the ball was going all over the place. So they really need Renfro to be healthy, to stay healthy all year, because I don't think they trust anyone there at their second spot at center. And you got to be able to snap the ball. I mean, you can't have that at center. Right guard, that's going to be another one of those competitions. Michael Furtney, a 6-year senior. I thought he held up pretty well last year when he played. It was his most significant role he's ever had. He started like 8 or 9 games. We'll see. Joe Huber, another Cincinnati transfer, is going to be a factor there, along with Trey Wettig, who played a lot of ball last year for them. And at right tackle, they're set with Riley Mahlman, who I'll be curious to see how he responds this year, because last year everybody was kind of expecting him to break out. And then he got injured in the first game and didn't return until about November or late October. And I don't think he ever really got his feet underneath him last year. But high expectations again for him this year. So as you can see, there's just a lot of kind of, you got a couple positions set, but then there's some question marks. You got to have Renfro at center. You can't have issues there. And then the right guard spot, we'll see what happens there. And then Riley Mahlman's got to take a step at right tackle. Otherwise, they're going to have to figure something else out there. So, I'm expecting this line to improve, like I said earlier, just based off of a lot of these guys have played together before. The Cincinnati transfers should be factors. So it looks like a pretty good unit on paper, but we'll see how they put it all together. Another thing with this line, too, is that given the pace, kind of like the receivers, given the pace of this offense, you might see some guys rotate. You might see a guy like, Trey Wettig or Joe Huber, they lose out on that right guard spot. They might, Jack Bicknell Jr., the offensive line coach, likes versatility, likes guys that can come in and play different spots. He isn't opposed to a rotation. He's used rotations during games, at Ole Miss, at North Carolina as well. He came over with Longo. So, just to keep those guys fresh throughout a game, you might see maybe a series off for a guy here. Not left tackle Jack Nelson, not him, but maybe you'll see one of those guards come out for a series, or, maybe they'll switch things up at right tackle for a series. We'll see what happens, but that should be another fascinating component for this line this year.
Yeah, Illinois has done a guard rotation, usually not the tackles or the center, but they certainly have done that with the guards. Jim Leonhard, you mentioned, he's gone. Mike Tressel comes with Luke Fickell from Cincinnati, has experience in the Big Ten with Michigan State as well. What's the outlook for this defense without Leonhard, without Herbig, without Keanu Benton?
Yeah, this defense should be I think the expectation is that this defense will be strong again this year, even though they lost quite a bit of production with Herbig and Benton. And obviously Herbig led the Big Ten in sacks last year. Benton, his numbers are really never that impressive, but just such a force in the middle, opening up opportunities for others to make plays. I think that they have some things to figure out in the defensive line. Not so sure about that yet. I think they have some good pieces there, but I'm not sure, how it all fits because they had some guys injured during the spring. Darian Werner transferred from Temple. I think they're really counting on him to make a big splash in the pass rush. They're going to need that from him. It might not be, we saw in the spring a lot of maybe, it was kind of a mixture of we saw some of what they were doing under Leonard, and then we saw some different, really kind of different looking schemes, closer like a 3-3-5 of what Cincinnati was running under Tressel and Fickell. So they're kind of trying to blend the two concepts and use the strengths they already had and kind of trying to create something new. So that's kind of been interesting to watch. We saw a lot of 3 inside linebacker looks with Muma Najong-Menta, Jake Chaney, and Jordan Turner, 3 guys who were productive last year. High expectations for them again. And then we saw some, a couple of the outside linebackers being used as defensive ends. It seemed like they were a little bit less reliant on their defensive line. They don't really have it. I don't think they really have it. Gio Paez is the guy that's going to be their nose tackle, but I don't know if they really have somebody who can truly consistently, play at a really, really high level, throughout a game there. I think the run defense might be a concern in that regard, because you look at Tressel's numbers from Cincinnati, and that's really what we have to go on right now, looking at previous numbers from where these coaches have been in the past and what they've done. The run defense might be a little bit of a concern, just given their lack of an experienced guy at nose tackle, and the defensive line production question marks. The outside linebacker room is filled with guys who have played a lot before, but haven't really had opportunities to make plays because Herbig was basically on the field, and he was the guy that was asked or given most of the opportunities to rush the passer and get into the backfield and make tackles for a loss. Daryl Peterson, a guy they used all over the field during spring ball. They had him lined up at inside linebacker depth, kind of as a hybrid safety almost, dropping him into coverage, rushing the passer. So expect a lot of different things from him. TJ Bowlers, they kind of lined him up at defensive end a couple of times. Jeff Petrowski, another guy that they're going to have to get some pass rush out of. He's transferred from Michigan State. He was pretty productive there 2 seasons ago, but got injured last year early on and missed the rest of the season. So, they'll be interesting to see the production of the outside linebackers and defensive line. I think they feel really good about their secondary. Alexander Smith is a 6-year senior, their number 1 corner. He missed most of last year, but he was solid when he returned. Ricardo Hallman, he had a tough task last year when he started the first 7 games as a redshirt freshman when Smith was injured, and he got scorched against Michigan State in an overtime loss, gave up 3 touchdowns, I believe, in coverage, and we didn't see him for the rest of the year pretty much after that. And he bounced back this spring. I liked what I saw from him. A lot of interceptions. I don't know if that was just because he was in the right place at the right time. It's kind of hard to tell sometimes during spring ball, but their corners, I think they feel pretty good about those guys. Jason Maitre, a guy in the slot from Boston College. He's kind of a physical guy, come up against the run, not afraid there. And then they got 3 or 4 safeties that can play. Hunter Wohler, Travian Blaylock, Kamoi Latu, Austin Brown. So they feel good about what they got there. Wohler is the guy they really can use all over the place. They're really, really excited about the potential for him this year. Another guy, Wisconsin seems like they have a lot of these guys that, were expected to break out last year, and then all of a sudden they got hurt and they missed a chunk of time. So Wohler is really another guy that can, kind of have a bounce back year for them after a tough injury luck last year.
Well, Michael, new coaching staff, 14 transfers. That's a lot of change. So I understand Wisconsin, with its talent, with its coaching, with the West still being wide open, feels like they could win this week. Like they could win the Big Ten West in its final year. But that's also a lot of change that could take some time, could take some growing pains. So they have a trip to Washington State. Ohio State comes to Camp Randall, but then you have crossovers against Rutgers and Indiana. That's pretty beneficial. So for you, what's a successful season look like for Luke Fickell's first year?
Yeah, Wisconsin fans might call us a conservative pick, but I'll go conservative after my predictions last year. I think you mentioned that Washington State game. I think that's going to be a tougher task than maybe some expect. That's a week 2 road game, West Coast. I don't know how Pullman is. I've never been there, but I'm assuming that it's a pretty tough environment to play in. And then you got Purdue 2 weeks after that on the road. That's a Friday night game. I know Wisconsin's had Purdue's number historically. They've won 16 in a row, but that's streak's end. And Purdue could be pretty tough this year with a new coaching staff and Hudson Card at quarterback. I think 9 wins is a successful year, and that might be good enough to win you the Big Ten West. I think the winner of this league again. I think the league will be better overall this year, but I still think it might be a situation where the winner has 3 or more losses, similar to last year. So I think 9 wins would be a really, really successful first year for Fickell, given just you're having whole new offense, drastically different offense, and then a defense that's going to be different too. And then you throw in 14 transfers. You got quite a few guys with different roles this year compared to last year. So I think 9 wins, you set the bar there. That's a successful year. 8 wins, you could argue that would be, respectable as well. I think 10 wins is a little on the heavy side for me, given just how much has changed. And I have seen a lot of that from the fans this offseason, 10, 11 wins. I can't see that. It would be great for the fans, but I don't know. I can't see that. I think 9 wins is my comfort zone right now. Without really going in depth on game predictions and stuff, I would say 9 wins. Like I said, could be good enough to get you to Indy.
Michael, last one for you. How is what Brett Bielema is doing at Illinois viewed in Wisconsin right now?
I think most people, I wasn't around covering this team then, but just looking at fans and maybe some other older media members, I think that the perception is that, well, first of all, he's really got that program going in the right direction. A lot of respect. I think there's a lot of respect for what he's done. Wisconsin fans are obviously a little bitter about the beatdown they took last year at the hands of Bielema as Illini, but I think respect just because it is in a lot of ways similar to what this program used to be, with the running game and the toughness and the defense. So I think respect and the feeling that it's very similar to what the blueprint was here for them. God, how many years ago was that now? It's like 2012 is when he left. It's like, that's when I was like in middle school. So, it's crazy. And I'm expecting that to be a big time challenge for Wisconsin this year, because you look at the schedule and they got Iowa at home, then they go to Illinois, and then they have Ohio State. That's kind of that's a really tough game to have sandwiched in between those 2 really big home games. So that could be I don't want to call it a trap game because Illinois is a good team, but that's a really tough game to have sandwiched in between those 2 games. One of them that could really go a long way in deciding the West against Iowa at home, and then you got Ohio State after that. Obviously, the storyline with Fickell and his coaching experience and playing experience there. A lot of coaches on staff as well have connections to Ohio State. So that's the first time the Buckeyes have come here or are going to come here since 2016. So that's the game everybody has circled. And then you got really, that's going to be a fascinating how they handle that road game against Illinois. And Illinois has won 2 of the last 4 against these guys. Yeah. One of them at home, 2019, and then last year.
Yeah, and this is homecoming for Illinois too. So out of all the games, maybe besides Penn State, if Illinois starts the year off 2-0, maybe that Penn State game's a sellout. But if any game's going to come close to a sellout, I think it'd be Illinois-Wisconsin if Illinois plays very well. So I think it's going to be a pretty ramped up crowd as well. And we know Bielema, and there's history there. It's probably under the bridge at this point, but there's that history element of it as well. Michael Hogan, Badger247. Michael, thank you for the insight into the Badgers and Luke Fickell's program. Still amazing. That was a surprise hire, and it's still kind of stunning that he's up there. But great hire for them. We'll see how it plays out year one, and I'll see you up at Big Ten Media Day, man.
Should be an interesting year, Jeremy. Thanks for having me on. We'll see you in Indy.